Hi, it's Pastor Andy with our Tuesday video of this week. And today, well, every student, every person, but we're just going to talk about students for a second. Every student has faced the frustration of futility. Now, that frustration could be due to not being prepared for a test in a subject they like, but it's often being forced to take a subject in school that they might not like. But the real point of the frustration is because in that moment, there is nothing that can be done. And again, that frustration is not just limited to students. That kind of futility is not just limited to school. You might be thinking right now of a number of different ideas as they're floating through your mind about things that have frustrated you because of some futility that was a part of your life. But something that we might not think about very often is that frustration and futility are not just human characteristics. Now, that may seem odd, but that's exactly what Paul is saying in Romans 8:19 through 22. Romans 8:19 through 22. Paul shares that creation is bound and therefore groaning to be free. He's personifying creation here. These words, as far as the creation, have caused a lot of debate because creation does not only include the world around us, but it also includes humanity. But in this case, creation cannot mean all of humanity because in verse 23, Paul wrote that the groaning of creation is included amongst we ourselves, and that we ourselves would only relate to those who are Christian, those who are believers. So this groaning is because of a desire of God, the desire for God, I should say, to set things straight. And those who do not know God, particularly those who do not like God, don't want God to set things straight, don't care if He does anything at all. So verse 23 makes it clear that the creation is not all of creation. The creation that is being referred to here is what is often called as non-humanity or subhumanity. But this part of creation is unable to do what it is intended to do. The natural part of creation, we might say, is unable to do what it is intended to do. And you might say, well, Andy, flowers are meant to bloom, and they bloom. Yes, they do. But Romans 8:20 makes it clear that they are subjected to futility in some way. This idea of futility, of being subjected, almost like a slave, I mentioned earlier, the idea of being bound, creation being bound, it's similar to what the picture that Paul painted in Romans chapter 6 and in Romans chapter 7 about humanity being a slave to sin, being bound by the law. Creation is not a slave to sin, but it is a slave in a sense because of Adam's sin. And therefore creation groans. Creation longs to be free. Creation desires to be more than it is. And of course, if you've read the back of the book, the back of the Bible that is, you will note that someday it will become more than it is. It eagerly longs for that day. It stretches out, seeking for the end to be near. It listens for clues that Jesus is returning. It wants to know how much longer it, being creation, must wait, and so it groans, just like the rest of us. So imagine for just a minute if creation was not bound. What might be different? What might we experience differently? Adam and Eve did have a glimpse of this for a while, but that's gone. And it will return in a different form, but what will that mean? In one of the classes I teach at seminary, I often ask, what color will heaven be? Or what colors will you see in eternity? And people normally stop for just a minute and they will say some of the prettiest colors imaginable, and they'll think through the Bible and they'll go to maybe Revelation 21 and they'll talk about the different jewels that are found there. People often mention white because of the white robes that it's mentioned in Revelation. They mention gold because of the street of gold. that Revelation 21, but even those answers that we can glean from Scripture may not be complete. The gold that is described in Revelation 21:21 is transparent. It says it's transparent as glass. The river is as bright as crystal. And even the colors of the jewels, things like the emerald and the jasper and the sapphire and such, in Revelation 21 verses 19 and 20, might be far sharper, might be far crisper than any color that we might attribute to those jewels today. In other words, are reds even redder? Are greens even greener? Are blues even bluer, etc.? And that's just the colors. If creation is bound in some way, is there something that mountains are supposed to do that they cannot do right now? You know, in our world, they're tall. We recognize them as tall. We recognize a mountain as a great place to climb, to get a nice vantage point for a nice scenic view. We recognize mountains today as a place where people, if there's snow, that they can go and they can ski and all of that. But is that what a mountain in heaven would be like, if indeed there are? Or what about plants? Or what about water? It's hard to know. Any other aspect of creation, what was its real intent? And we could ask the same thing about humanity. But like humanity, creation is currently bound. It longs to be free, and it does so because it knows something more exists. Something exists beyond what is known right now. In our hearts, we know the same thing too, and we long for something more. But the question is are we longing for God? Only God can set us free. So it is for God that we should long. So let's take a cue from creation and make sure our cries are to the one who can truly deliver us from the bondage that we face today.